Chapter 4. Lizard's prediction had been accurate. One of the hostages had been a car dealer, and everyone else in town pitched in to cover the cost of 2 sport utility vehicles, since they did not have vans that would seat everyone. Though both of the vehicles were used, it was clear that they had been well maintained, and for everyone but Erica and Jennifer, they were the most luxurious vehicles in which they had traveled. "The mind demon worshippers talked about a plan to attack the healing shrine," said Jonathan as they began driving. Row 82 was driving this particular vehicle. Jonathan was sitting next to Kirana. Lizard was in the front passenger seat, while Sig and Lucas sat in the back. "Attacking the healing shrine?" exclaimed Lucas from behind. Jonathan turned a bit and nodded. "They said something about William Fine trying to control the Heaven's Breath key bearer," said Jonathan. "They seemed to think they would gain immortality with it." "Theoretically, if they could control the mind of a divine key bearer, they would have access to a key for which they were not chosen," said Lucas. "I don't know about the origin of the keys enough to know whether that is possible, which is kind of frustrating since I have the key of origins." Sig laughed at Lucas, notwithstanding the sincerity with which he spoke. "They mentioned something else," said Jonathan. "They said that the demon prophetess warned that William Fine would become a puppet of the archdemon." Sig laughed again. "I'm sorry," said Sig as he regained his composure. "The puppeteer becoming a puppet. Sometimes I just love irony." "You should talk to Erica when we stop for fuel," suggested Row 82. "True," said Lucas. "She may not be completely current on what is happening with the Council of Nine, but she's more reliable than Jennifer." Jonathan smiled. Erica drove the smaller vehicle, and she insisted that Stephanie sit up in the front passenger seat next to her. Jennifer and Victor sat next to one another in the back seat. It was not long before Stephanie drifted to sleep. In her dreams, she saw her mother, Natalie, giving her a disappointing look. "Stephanie," said Natalie, "you don't need to be so angry." "I can't help it," said Stephanie. She realized that she could speak out loud, and for a moment she felt a hint of relief. She had not felt as though anyone could understand her, and she was tired of being forced to bottle everything up. "That's a lie, Stephanie," said her mother in a disappointed tone. "I watched that augment kill you," said Stephanie. "Don't tell me that I should be okay with that." "Shouldn't I?" asked Natalie. "Because your anger certainly helped you identify the traitor with evil intentions." "There's no need to be sarcastic," said Stephanie angrily. "There's as much need to be angry as there is to be sarcastic," replied Natalie. "I taught you better than that." Tears of regret filled Stephanie's eyes. She had been brutalized as a slave, and while she bore no great love for Kappa 16 or the augment tormentors, she had never been an angry woman. "Mom," she said, People can't always choose their circumstances," said her mother. "I certainly would have chosen a better father for you if I could have, but even with what happened to me, I was happy when you came to me." She smiled softly and gave Stephanie a hug. The knowledge that the augment slaver that ran the awful plantation in which she had been raised was her father had hit her like the stunners on the guards in that compound, but Stephanie had not given a lot of thought to how her mother had handled it. "Promise me that you will let go of bitterness," she whispered. Everything faded to darkness as Stephanie's dream ended. As she realized she was leaving her mother again, she squeezed her eyelids shut as though she could shield herself from the loss by refusing to watch her vision end. "How can I?" whispered Stephanie as the pain of losing her mother was brought back. Erica checked the rearview mirror and noticed that Jennifer and Victor were already asleep. She turned to Stephanie and noticed her rubbing her eyes. "How are you doing, Stephanie?" asked Erica. She feigned exhaustion and shrugged in response. She did not want to talk to anyone. She felt as though there was a terrible hole in her heart, and she felt alone. On top of losing her mother, she had been rejected by Jonathan. Her dream had only made her feel more bitterness. She definitely did not want to talk to Erica. "Let me tell you something," said Erica. "And if you want me to stop, just say stop." Stephanie's eyes widened as she looked at Erica in disbelief. Erica had a smile on her face. All the same, Stephanie found asking a person who cannot speak to speak up if they want something to be abrasive, though after another moment she smiled herself. She could tell that Erica was genuinely concerned about her, and though Stephanie was hesitant to admit it to herself, Erica's brazen attitude was refreshing and almost endearing. "Don't hold on to bitterness," said Erica at last. The warm tone had completely left her voice. Her words carried pleading with them and were laced with personal regret. "And don't try to deny that you are feeling bitter. I can tell. I know I don't know everything about you, and you probably have good reasons to feel upset. I had good reasons to be upset too. My husband was brutally murdered. I was angry that Jennifer didn't go back in time and save him. I was angry when people offered me sympathy, and I was angry when people stopped offering it to me. It was bitterness that led me to seal the key of origins away. I might have been able to do some good for others, but instead I focused on how much they didn't deserve it, or how I deserved better." Stephanie frowned. She wanted to hold on to bitterness. The one man that could truly understand her was in love with an angry ice queen. She disliked Kirana. She enjoyed feeling bitterness toward her. It felt natural. She felt incredible anger toward Row 82, and she felt justified in her feelings. She did not want to be lectured by her mother, let alone by Erica. "I've never told this to Kirana," said Erica, "but my daughter Amber is engaged to marry a boy in that compound. The boy's name is Luke Sepharvaim." Stephanie's eyebrows raised as she recognized Kirana's last name. Row 82 had explained that Erica was Kirana's ancestor, and she had noticed the similarities, but hearing it from Erica herself, and hearing the regret in her voice, Stephanie became extra attentive. "I don't suppose I have ever had a warm personality," confessed Erica, "but I became so angry at everyone and everything. Although I love my daughter, I can see that she has been forced to carry my bitterness that I stubbornly held on to. What makes me truly regret how I have handled my life is seeing Kirana appear to hold on to that same bitterness." Erica's voice trembled slightly with emotion. She took a deep breath to regain control of her emotions. In spite of her feelings about Kirana, Stephanie felt a bit of pity come into her heart. Although she knew where Erica was going with the train of thought, she had no desire to interrupt her. "I can't help but think that my anger with life, my bitterness," said Erica, "is that what I have left to my posterity? Is that the only thing I have given to my children? I wanted them to be happy. I fooled myself into thinking that my anger only affected myself. That's the real reason I'm here, Stephanie. I'm here to redeem myself." Stephanie's heart filled with sympathy for Erica. In that moment, her bitter feelings disappeared. She looked down at the mirrored key that hung on a chain about her neck. She had been so excited to be chosen, and yet she had been so filled with anger for Row 82 that she had missed seeing Daniel's treachery. She had been so focused on Jonathan being with Kirana that she wondered if she were not missing something important. As a slave, she never had trouble putting her own hunger aside to deliver something to the abandoned prisoners, and she wondered how she had changed. A tear of regret escaped her eye. "Tell me I haven't come back here for nothing," said Erica as she reached back, grabbed Stephanie's arm, and looked her in the eye. "Promise me that you will let go of bitterness, that you will search for happiness." The soft hum of the engine was the only sound for the next minute. Erica looked forward to ensure the vehicle stayed in the correct lane, but did not release Stephanie's arm. The words that Erica spoke mirrored the message of her dream. Tears welled up in her eyes. She felt as though her mother had not left her. It was as though she were still trying to take care of her, even after she had died. Finally, Stephanie put her free hand on top of Erica's. Erica turned to her. "I promise," she mouthed as clearly as she could. Erica smiled. Stephanie pulled herself close to Erica and gave her as much of a hug as she could while Erica drove. Erica returned the embrace as much as she could. Tears streamed down both of their cheeks for a few moments. Finally, Erica pulled back to wipe her eyes so she could see to drive. Stephanie wiped her own eyes and sniffed. The women smiled at one another. Suddenly, Erica's face seemed to fade away as Stephanie watched. She looked down and saw her divine key glowing brightly. The entire world seemed to melt away into a vision, and she found herself standing on the edge of a cliff. It was not a natural cliff. The earth itself had been sliced open. She looked around in awe as she saw fires and rubble all around. "It's the healing shrine," said a voice from behind her. She spun around and saw Victor in a hooded cloak. "Or rather, that's what will be left of it," he added. "We're too late?" asked Stephanie. She disliked the emotional strain that she felt. Being yanked from the heartfelt discussion with Erica to a vision of the future made her feel dizzy. "Too late to prevent the destruction of the healing shrine," said Victor. "But was that really your goal?" "We went to defeat the destroyer," said Stephanie with a frown. "A noble cause," said Victor. "But to defeat the destroyer, you will need a great amount of power. And power always comes with a price." "What are you saying?" asked Stephanie. "How did the destroyer obtain his power?" asked Victor. "Was it not through murdering thousands of people? Isn't that how all the demon worshippers gain power? Through the sacrifice of their unwilling victims? And even the augments in the future that reach for strength by climbing on the backs of those they consider unfit? All power comes with a price." "But the divine keys grant power freely," said Stephanie. "Do they?" asked Victor. "Or do they loan power with the expectation of exacting a price from the bearer later? What do you see in the future?" Victor's question made Stephanie feel uncomfortable. She shifted back and forth as she considered his words. His piercing gaze made her feel small and transparent. She clutched the sides of her arms as if to cover herself. Suddenly Victor vanished from sight, and a dark purple beam appeared. It was Abaddon. A large man in a long white cloak ran toward the destroyer. Though she had never before seen the cloaked man, she knew that this man was Drew Baker, the wielder of the Heaven's Shield Key in the Council of Nine. "Who are you?" shouted Drew as sweat dripped down his face. "I am Abaddon," replied the destroyer. "Well, Abaddon," said Drew defiantly, "this ends here." "Unlikely," said the destroyer. It raised its clawed hand toward Drew and unleashed a beam of darkness. A sphere of golden light surrounded Drew and protected him. "You cannot penetrate an absolute defense," shouted Drew. "There is no absolute defense," replied the destroyer. "You are arrogant," shouted Drew. "Said the man who declared his defense absolute," retorted Abaddon. The destroyer placed his large clawed hands on the ground. Darkness rippled through the earth, tearing rock, root, and dirt apart beneath Drew. He leapt into the air, and as he did, his golden shield dissipated. Some of the dark energy leapt up from the ground and wrapped around his throat. As Drew landed on solid ground, his shield went up again, freeing him from the chokehold of his enemy. Suddenly Jennifer ran up next to her. "Jennifer?" asked Stephanie. She did not seem to hear her. She watched intently as Drew leapt toward his enemy and fired several rounds with his shotgun. Abaddon was blasted back and rolled on the ground. "He defeated him!" exclaimed Jennifer. "Impossible," said Stephanie. "You should know better, Jennifer. Our guns couldn't hurt him." Abaddon suddenly rolled toward Drew and fired a pair of dark beams. Drew's shield protected him from most of the attack, but it pushed him back into the spot where the other beam had created a large hole. He fell into the crevice, but his shield prevented any harm from coming to him. "Drew!" screamed Jennifer. Hearing her voice, the destroyer turned to face her. "Jennifer Cedar!" he shouted. Jennifer backed away uncomfortably. Stephanie watched in confusion. "How do you know me?" screamed Jennifer. "Where did you come from? What do you want?" The creature laughed cruelly. "You were the one who told us who he was, Jennifer," said Stephanie in a confused tone. "You know exactly who he is, unless your memory is gone again." "To your first question, you helped me become Abaddon," replied the destroyer. "You helped make me who I am." "I would never help you, murderer!" screamed Jennifer. "It was more my fault than hers," whispered Stephanie. "To your second question," continued the destroyer, "I came from the same place you did." "Shut up!" screamed Jennifer. "Shut up, shut up, shut up!" Rubble from within the crevice into which the destroyer had pushed Drew began to stir, but Abaddon took little notice. "To your third question, I want to harness the power of human sacrifice," shouted Abaddon gleefully. Drew leapt up from the crevice, pointing his weapon at the destroyer. The creature had the palms of his hands stretched in opposite directions, one toward Jennifer and one toward Drew. He laughed cruelly as Drew tried to think his way out of the predicament. "You cannot save two people with your heavenly shield," said Abaddon. Jennifer pulled out her divine key and closed her eyes, preparing to release her power. She opened her eyes suddenly as Drew screamed in pain. He gripped his own divine key, but the golden shield surrounded Jennifer instead of him. Jennifer screamed out and disappeared in a flash of light as Drew began disintegrating under the power of Abaddon's beam. Suddenly Stephanie realized that this Jennifer was the one that had existed before. This Jennifer had not yet met her. This Jennifer had probably just been sent into the awful future that had been born from Abaddon's reign of destruction. She whirled around to see Jennifer walking toward her. This time, Jennifer's eyes glowed brightly, and she seemed more aware of what was happening. "It's down there," whispered Jennifer as she pointed to the crevice in which Drew had been vaporized. Suddenly Lizard, Lucas, Sig, Kirana, Jonathan, Victor, Ro82, Erica, and another version of Stephanie rushed up behind her. The Stephanie in the vision looked right at her and pointed at Jennifer, then rushed in front of her. A dark wave of energy began flowing through the ground, enveloping the Stephanie in the vision, causing her to choke. The others screamed. Stephanie looked back to see Abaddon pressing his clawed hands against the ground, laughing as he attacked her. Suddenly everything went dark. "What do you see in the future?" whispered Victor's voice again. Stephanie gasped in surprise and found herself in the passenger seat next to Erica. Sweat had beaded on her forehead, and she struggled to regain her breath. "What did you see?" asked Erica. Stephanie pulled out a piece of paper as she thought about what to write. She realized that her future self had been giving her a message. The destroyer was going to kill one of them. She had an opportunity to make up for the mistake that she had made with Daniel by ensuring that she was the one that took the attack. She could save the others. She decided not to tell Erica that she was going to die. After their discussion, Stephanie felt that Erica might do something crazy, and someone else would get killed. Even worse, she might get killed herself. After Erica had poured her heart out to Stephanie, Stephanie could not allow her to take the fall for anyone else. Stephanie had lost her mother. She was determined not to lose Erica. She looked back at Jennifer as she slept. It was an odd sensation to watch the person for whom she had seen herself give her life to protect. She blinked and turned back to her paper. She recognized that her words here determined her commitment to protect her friends. She thought about the day she first saw Jennifer inside her cell. She had believed that it was destiny that had guided her to Jennifer. She loved seeing the divine keybearers stand up to the augments that had enslaved her and her mother for so long. She had always wanted the power to escape and to free the slaves there. She thought about Victor's warning. She wondered if she had incurred some kind of metaphysical debt in acquiring the power to stop Kappa 16. She would have thought that the life of her mother was more than enough to have paid it, but perhaps fate wanted more. She pulled out her pencil and scribbled on the sheet, then handed it to Erica. Erica took it and read it. "I saw the destroyer kill Victor," it said.